Look what I found! What is it? Looks like a powder stone.
These students are part of an archaeology workshop. They found a rock, actually an ancient tool. They've discovered it near St. Louis, Missouri, not far from where the Illinois and Mississippi rivers join, the home of an Indian culture which flourished 1,500 years before Columbus arrived in America. The land is rich in natural resources. The bluffs that protected the Indians from cold winter winds were covered with nut trees. These people are a mystery to us, for they left no books or written records of any kind. They wrote nothing down about their hunting, their games, their gods, or their laws. However, these Indians left behind many physical clues that tell us something of their lives. These objects, called artifacts, provide the only information the archaeologist has to work with.
Look what I found. What is it? What is it? Do you know what culture could be from?
Yeah, this is a hammerstone. You can tell by looking at the pecking here on the edge. They were using this to pound something.
What? What?
Well, you could grind nuts with it, or corn, or something like that by smashing them up on another rock.
It's from artifacts like this one that the archaeologist will attempt to piece together the lives of these unknown people. The first step in archaeology is the surface pickup. With the cooperation of a local farmer, these students carefully search between rows of soybeans for artifacts. Now remember that everything counts. What's found on the surface gives an idea of what's underneath. The results of the surface pickup are plotted on a map.
Well, what do you think?
We seem to find a lot of artifacts right in there.
Well, then why don't we open up our excavations there?
Yeah. We start excavating with shovels, and in case we hit anything, we have childs ready to pick them up.
We take the dirt and we throw it onto a screen and screen all the dirt through, taking out the materials that we get, such as bone, pottery, or any artifacts that we might have missed.
Archaeology is teamwork. Everyone works closely with the chief archaeologist to excavate and sort out the material. On the field, it's difficult to tell exactly what an artifact is. Artifacts are usually well disguised under layers of dirt. But after some washing, the patterns, styles, and designs become clear. Now these artifacts can be correctly sorted and properly analyzed.
You might think it's kind of weird to be using a paintbrush to clean a piece of pottery, but if you use a scrub brush and she's using it on a piece of chert, well, you'll take away all your markings here. And you have to leave the markings so the lab can define and see what is middle woodland or late woodland pottery.
Each culture seemed to have distinctive ways of manufacturing pottery and distinctive ways of decorating their pottery. So if we find a sherd or a piece of pottery with a particular decoration or a particular shape or style, we can say what group of people or what culture made that piece of pottery. From microscopic studies of the pots that we find at the sites, it looks like what they were doing is rolling their clay into long, thin strips or coils, and then wrapping these coils around in circular forms to make their pots. A culture is a group of people who leave behind things with a certain set of characteristics. Before you add a little bit more. Culture does not change with a bang. Culture changes in gradual processes. This pot gives us a clue to trade networks in prehistoric times. By analyzing this pot, which we were able to glue back together, we can determine where the clay which made the pot came from. And we sent some of the clay to a chemist, and he told us that the clay that made this pot came from Wisconsin. So either the clay itself or the finished pot was traded all the way down here from Wisconsin. By working with the chemist, we were able to say more about the pot than just an archaeologist working alone would have been able to say.
Pat and I were given this square, and each square is 5 by 5 feet long, and so there's plenty of room for each of us to dig in.
You use a trowel when you're hitting a different color soil, which is midden, where it's been like that for thousands of years. It's, the Indians left it that way.
Brett, look what I found. Hey, put it back. Why, you got a piece plot?
Sometimes if you found something important, you would plot it, piece plot it, and you could be able to put in it's exact to the inch.
You dig only 3 inches at a time, and this is called a level.
A level is a way of us measuring where we found artifacts or whatever we found. I didn't expect any writing at all, or hardly any.
Archaeologists are constantly asking themselves 2 questions. Where is it, and why is it there? The where may help answer the why.
Hey, look at how much darker the soil is in there.
Anytime these ancient Indians dug a hole, the hole eventually refilled with soil that was different in color from the surrounding soil. We call these refilled holes features.
We started to dig the feature with trowels, and we found some burnt charcoal and burnt limestone and scattering of bone and bits of things that look like seeds. And other things that would have resulted from a fire or fire pit.
This fireplace answers some of the questions about what the people were eating.
I see you have a piece of charcoal there.
And how they were gathering their
You might
food.
want to save that for a carbon-14 date. We can tell the age of this pit by dating the carbon in that wood charcoal.
Well, what about this? Can you carbon date that?
This projectile point isn't an organic material. It's a stone object, and stone has no carbon in it. So we wouldn't be able to use a carbon-14 dating like we can on that wood charcoal. But we can take it to the Stone Artifact Lab, and the analysts there can tell us how old this is by the style of the point.
What you got?
We have a projectile point we found in our feature today. Steve said we could date the site through something like this. How would that be done?
Oh, let's see. You can't always tell from a single artifact how old it is, but we have other artifacts to go by. Along with these points with the deep side notches and the convex base, we have these polyhedral cores, and we also have these nice parallel-sided flakes, all of which date to about 2,000 years ago.
What would these tools have been used for?
We call these things lamellar flakes. We think they're various types of knives, maybe for leather cutting. You just take a flake in the leather and just start cutting. And it cuts fairly well. Leather's pretty tough. Just like that.
The Carbon-14 lab confirmed the findings from the Stone Artifacts Lab that our fireplace was used between 100 BC and 50 AD. From the pottery lab, we discovered that the people were the Hopewells. From the flint skinning knife, it appears that these people prepared the meat near the fire that would later cook it. They had abundance of foods to choose from. Which did they use and why? Many of these items are so small that they can't be collected in the shovel or the trowel or even the table screen. So we have to have developed a new technique, a process called flotation. Lift the basket up higher, higher. There you go. Now dump it. Okay. There you go. So I'll swish through here. Now we're going to want to get the heavy remains off the bottom. So I want you to put all the dirt down in this one corner. We'll recover such tiny remains as carbonized seeds, nuts, fish scales, fish bones, as well as burnt clay objects, pottery, and shirt plates. Okay, that's real good. Now you can empty your
By
bucket
studying
out.
these plant remains, the botanist has an idea of what the people were eating.
The plants they use the most would be the nuts, like hickory nuts and acorns and black walnuts and pecans.
The Illinois River Valley was rich in natural weed crops. Because they were easily harvested and provided a ready source of food, we suspect that these people did not need to use agriculture.
Okay, Richard, we can see here the sample that we just took out of the water. After it's dried, we'll be able to separate it then into these other two samples by using a chemical process. In this charcoal sample, we'll find such things as nutshells and wood fragments. And then the heavier sample, such things as bone, will be left behind, as well as small chert flakes and pieces of clay blobs.
What's this bone, isn't it?
Yes, this looks like a fish bone.
Tommy, I found this bone out doing flotation with Steve Noble, and he said it was a fish bone, but he couldn't tell me what kind. Could you tell me what kind it is?
Right, that's a fish vertebra. From the vertebra, it's really hard to figure out exactly which kind of fish it is because they're all very similar.
Do you know how big the fish was?
Yeah, you can estimate the size just by comparing it with modern fish. And one thing that we've learned by doing this is that the people were eating fish of a real wide size range, from 3 inches to about 48 inches in size. By studying the bones from the hearts at the site, we get a pretty good idea of what the people ate and what their diet was like in general. And thus far we know that most of the meat came from white-tailed deer and from the different kinds of fish.
Hey, look at that. The color has changed again.
You've hit the sterile layer. If you go down any deeper, you won't find any more evidences of debris that man left behind.
Just this one feature has told us a lot about this culture. Features are considered the building blocks of archaeology.
By looking at how this feature relates to the feature next door to it, to the feature that is 100 feet away from it, we can then begin to piece together something about the structure of his village, how he was organizing his space.
The archaeologist will always make sure that there is enough material gathered to avoid stepping out on a limb, using too little information and drawing assumptions from it. For this reason, archaeologists have to open up and excavate large areas. The Coster site, only a mile away from where the students are digging, is an example of this. The Coster site was begun a number of years ago using the same methods and techniques. This kind of excavation gives us a more complete picture. It shows the full range of what the people were doing.
You know, I'm often asked why we tackle a site like Coster, a big hole like this with many levels. 14 villages covering over 8,000 years of human life. It's in a site like this that we can actually see why these ancient civilizations rose and decayed. Perhaps getting some clues that will help us live better today. Basically, we're looking for clues to help solve our own problems. And you've got to look at ancient culture over many, many long time periods before you can do that. What were these people like? They were very much like you and I. They belonged to the same species as you and I. And if one of these people walked downtown Chicago, you would say, there goes an American Indian. And yet they lived here 400 generations ago. They're the same people as you and I. And in fact, what we're looking at is you and I, in a sense, thousands of years ago. And therefore, we're looking at our own history.